hoping someone is as good as Caitlin Cottrell was last period. She was the MVP of the period. She was answering questions like crazy. So let's see if anybody's as good. All right. What we're going to talk about is 1957 at a glance. And I'm going to pick things out that happened each month of the year, kind of off the cuff, a little bit different interest in history. And we'll talk about those. The first month obviously is January. We're going to tell you about a significant thing that happened in the sports world on January 5th of 1957. January 5th of 1957. And on that date, professional baseball player Jackie Robinson announced that he would retire from professional baseball. On January 5th of 1957, professional baseball player Jackie Robinson announces he will retire from professional baseball. Now, does anybody know the significance of Jackie Robinson? That's exactly the right answer. He's the first African American or Negro player to play in the major leagues. There were minor league teams, including a Negro League, at one time. So there were other Negroes that were playing minor league baseball, but he was the first man. He broke the color barrier. He was signed to a contract by a guy by the name of Branch Brickey of the Brooklyn Dodgers before they moved to Los Angeles, and became the first African American or Negro baseball player in Major League Baseball. A little bit about his career. He signed with the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1947. 1947, when there was a big apprehension about allowing Negroes into the major leagues. And his first year in the league in 1947, he was named Rookie of the Year. He was the best rookie in Major League Baseball. So he continually had to prove himself. And were there a lot of people just waiting for this black player to fail? Well, certainly there were. And he didn't fail. He actually was the Rookie of the Year in 1957. 2 years later, in 1949, he was the league's most valuable player. 2 years later, in 1949, he was the most valuable player in Major League Baseball. So he's the Rookie of the Year his first year in 47. He's the most valuable player of Major League Baseball in 49. And then in 1955, he leads the Brooklyn Dodgers to what? World Series championship. Okay, so he had a very, very successful 10-year career in Major League Baseball. So, on January 5th of 1957, professional baseball player Jackie Robinson announces he will retire from professional baseball. Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier when he became the first black athlete to play Major League Baseball. He signed with the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1947, was named Rookie of the Year in 1947, Most Valuable Player in 1949, and became a World Series champion in 1955. Throughout his 10-year career, he distinguished himself as a great baseball player, but also a vocal civil rights activist. So he's not only a great baseball player, but he was a very vocal civil rights activist. Anybody know anything else about Jackie Robinson you might want to share with the group as a baseball fan? Did you know that every Major League Baseball team has retired the number 42? When they made that decision, there were players that were wearing 42, and the decision was made when those players left that team or left the organization or retired, that number would not be given again. The last one that comes to mind was Mariano Rivera, who was a relief pitcher for the New York Yankees, very good, wore number 42, and when he retired, that was the end of that. And if you look at all Major League stadiums, they all have retired 42, and usually somewhere in their stadium, usually on the home run walls, you'll see a 42 encircled that distinguishes that number has been retired from Major League Baseball. What is really cool is his wife is still alive and still runs his foundation. She's quite old, but she has help. And they always have a Jackie Robinson Day, one day every year in baseball. And what does everybody do, Rachel? What do all the players do on that day? All players wear number, very good, they will all wear number 42 on that day. So it's kind of cool. You watch baseball games all over the country, and every single player has got the number 42. It's a pretty big deal. It was a big deal to not only history in general, but sports history as well. Okay, that's what happened in January. On February 15th, what happened on this date is going to be significant in lectures we have later. That's why we're mentioning this. And what happened on February 15th of 1957 is a Russian by the name of Andrei Gromyko, was named Soviet Foreign Minister to the United States. Okay? On February 15th of 1957, a Russian by the name of Andrei Gromyko was named Foreign Soviet Minister to the United States. Okay? Now, the reason I mentioned that Andrei Gromyko was named Soviet Foreign Minister to the United States is he's going to become a major player in what historic time in American history? Cuban Missile Crisis. He's going to be the, obviously, if you look at the title, he's going to be the Soviet Foreign Minister that's in the United States, that's helping with relations between the United States and Russia during this Cold War, and he will come into being again when we talk about the Cuban Missile Crisis. But he takes over as a Soviet Foreign Minister to the United States on February 15, 1957. Okay, we'll move on to March 11th. March 11th. On that date, Admiral Richard Byrd dies at the age of 68. On that date, Admiral Richard Byrd dies at the age of 68. Anybody know what Richard Byrd did in history? Nobody knew last period. He was the first man and the only man, no, he's not the only man, he's the first man to fly over both the North Pole and the South Pole, okay? He was the first man to fly over both the North Pole and the South Pole, and he died at the age of 68 on March 11, 1957. Richard Byrd. Now, the first picture on your handout has to do with April 9th of 1957, and by looking at that picture, what do you think happened on April 9th of 1957, Andy? The first Fiat, which was an Italian automobile, hit the American market. The first Fiat, which was an Italian automobile, hit the American market. Why would I bring that up? What does that car remind you of in today's world? Like a Cooper, maybe a Mini Cooper, maybe these new Kia Sorrentos or whatever they are, these tinier cars. Well, it was unusual to have that. What were American cars like in the 50s? Big boats, big metal boats. So here comes a Fiat, which became fairly popular in the United States. And it was kind of one of the first foreign cars to hit an American market. Now we have many, many foreign cars that hit the American market. Okay, May 6th of 1957. May 6th of 1957. Senator John F. Kennedy of Massachusetts wins the Pulitzer Prize for Literature. Senator John F. Kennedy of Massachusetts wins the Pulitzer Prize for Literature. What book did he write that was so famous?
Told us about it.
I told us last year. Matter of fact, one of his chapters in the book is about Edmund G. Ross. Did that ring a bell from Edmund G. Ross? He was the guy that took over for Senator Jim Lane in Kansas. Profiles in Courage is the name of the book. So on May 6th of 1957, Senator John F. Kennedy of Massachusetts wins the Pulitzer Prize for Literature with this new book entitled Profiles in Courage. A couple of notes about that I want to mention. He wrote about 8 courageous Americans. One of those happened to be Edmund G. Ross of Kansas, the senator of Kansas, who took over after the death of Senator Jim Lane during the Andrew Johnson impeachment hearing after Lincoln was assassinated. Remember, the radical Republicans wanted Johnson out of office, and it came down to Edmund G. Ross's vote. He was the last vote. He's a Republican. All the Republicans are expecting him to vote guilty, and he votes not guilty, and his political career is over. And John Kennedy was so impressed with him that he wrote a chapter about him in Profiles in Courage. And that book wins the Pulitzer Prize. To give you an idea of how popular that book is, if you look over on this bookshelf, we've got Profiles in Courage, the illustrated edition, Profiles in Courage, the Memorial Edition, Profiles in Courage, the remake edition, the original, the inaugural edition. It just goes on and on. Young Readers Edition. This is a very, very popular book that has been remade many, many times since 55, 56. Very popular book today. So that's what happened on May 6th of 1957. Any tracksters in here? Oh, Charles, this will be right up your alley. You and Aaron, would you like to run long distances, right? Aren't you a cross countryer?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, well, let me tell you about this story. So on June 1st of 1957, this fellow right here, so somehow I excluded off of your sheet, Don Bowden. He was the first American to break the 4-minute mile. First American to run the mile run in less than 4 minutes. Anybody know you guys know who the first person to run the mile in less than 4 minutes was? A guy from England named Roger Bannister. But anyway, Don Bowden becomes the first American to break the 4-minute mile barrier track and field. Anybody know what the world record is now for the mile?
Really fast?
It's like 350. Oh no, it's way less. I think it's like 320 something. I don't know. We'll look it up after class. But that, if you to be the first person to break the 4-minute mile back in those days was huge. Roger Bannister did it from England, and then Don Bowden did it from America. All right, here's one for you, another sports thing. July 11th, 1957. July 11th, 1957. A tennis player by the name of Althea Gibson was given a ticker tape parade in her hometown. On July 11th, 1957, a tennis player by the name of Althea Gibson was given a ticker tape parade in her hometown. Anybody guess what her hometown was?
New York.
New York City. So this is a big time ticker tape parade. You really got to do something in people's minds to get a ticker tape parade in New York City. What did she do? What? What did you? She won Wimbledon. Yeah, she won Wimbledon. So a week earlier, that's a big deal. Probably the most prestigious tennis tournament in the world. She wins Wimbledon. But what else is the significance about the ticker tape parade she gets for winning? Say it. Well, the women, they always have a women champion. What are you going to say? First what? Besides woman. What'd you say? What did you say? She was the first African American or Negro tennis player to win Wimbledon. So, on July 11th of 1957, Negro tennis player Althea Gibson is given a ticker tape parade in her hometown of New York City in recognition for her winning the prestigious Wimbledon tennis tournament a week earlier. Very good. Yeah. All right, now this is my favorite one. Get your sheets out and turn them to the Edsel. It's a car, not like the Fiat. Pretty fancy looking thing, isn't it? Now, I'm going to give you some information here. I want you to listen. Ford Motor Company, now listen carefully, spent $250 million researching the type of car that the Americans would like prior to making the Edsel. So before they ever made it or released it to the American public, they spent $250 million researching it. Once they researched it, they built it, and on August 26th of 1957, the Edsel was introduced to the American public as a car for sale. So after spending $250 million in research, Ford Motor Company presented the Edsel to the Americans. Why is it so famous?
Because it flopped.
It was the lemon of all lemons. It was nobody bought them. I mean, I shouldn't say nobody. I'm going to give you some statistics, but they did not sell like they thought they would after spending $250 million in research. Why? Did they run bad?
No.
No. Why didn't they sell?
They look. They're ugly.
Well, in a way, it's like me. So I go to Billings this weekend. I go to Billings this weekend, right? And I take my wife's car, our Explorer. I can't even figure out how to turn the damn heat on. I mean, in my pickup, I just turn the knob. High, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Over to red. This thing's got this screen on it, and it's got a temperature and a climate. I mean, I am driving down the road about to get in a wreck because I'm freezing to death, and I cannot figure out how to turn the heater on this thing. In my mind, That car was a little ahead of my time. The Edsel was a car, in all honesty, that was ahead of its time. It was too fancy, too futuristic for American people, and people simply did not purchase it. Okay? They didn't purchase it. Now, I'm going to give you some examples. I don't want you to really write these down. I just want you to listen so you get the point. Okay? In 1958, the first ones are called the night. Even though if we talk about August 26th of 57, they were 1958 cars, brand new. Okay? They made four different types of Edsels. There was a Citation, there was a Ranger, there was a Pacer, there was a Corsair. And they were all a little bit different, but they were all Edsels, okay? Now, to give you an idea what they cost brand new, an Edsel Ranger sold anywhere between $2,400 and $2,600 brand new, okay? That was the cheapest. A Pacer was like $2,700 to $2,900, and a Corsair was $3,300 to $3,300 to $3,400, and then as a Citation was the most expensive, it was like $3,500 to $3,700. We'll give you some statistics. Now listen, just so you get an idea. In 1958, the first year they sold them, they sold about 63,000 cars in the United States and about 5,000 in Canada. So they sold approximately 70,000 cars. Okay. The next year in 59, they only sold about 46,000 cars. That's how the interest level had gone. In 1960, they only made 2,846 cars total. And Ford Motor Company figured they lost $350 million, or $2.8 billion in today's money, on the Edsel. It was an absolute disaster for Ford Motor Company. They lost a lot of money on the Edsel. Now, yes.
Oh, is the score pretty rare then, since
That's-
nobody bought them?
Yeah, I just looked one up on eBay the other day and found a 1960 Ford Ranger in really good shape. Ford Edsel Ranger, $47,000. So if you have one, if you have any kind of an Edsel from 58, 59, or especially 60, because they only made 2,846 of them, get on eBay if you're bored today and look up 1960 or 1959 or 1958 Edsel and see what they're going for. In perfect condition, 50, 60 grand maybe. In crappy condition, probably 10 or 20 grand to fix up, because there's none of them around. Good question.
That's not cheap.
What?
59 50 bills.
What's that? Yeah, no, there's a lot of cars that they didn't make now. Okay, September 2nd, 1957. More baseball stuff. Now, anybody here know anything about baseball? Anybody baseball players? Okay, September 2nd, 1957. A baseball player by the name of Frank Torrey, who played for the Milwaukee Braves, if you care, scored 6 runs in one game. Scored 6 runs. That doesn't mean he had 6 home runs, which somebody thought that meant that. No, he scored 6 runs in one game. Frank Torrey of the Milwaukee Braves, on September 2nd, 1957, scored 6 runs in one baseball game. That's pretty hard to do, because the normal baseball player in a normal 9-inning game will get up 4 times. So either this had to go extra innings, or you had to bat around a few times. But even with that scenario, you still got to get on base, because a 300 hitter, a guy that gets 1 base hit, or 3 base hits out of 10 or 1 out of 3 is a hell of a hitter. So you still got to get on base. Now you could get walked to get on base, etc. But to score 6 runs in one game is pretty unusual. And he did that for the first time. Anybody did it on September 2nd of 1957. Anybody want to guess how many times that's been done in Major League history? There's a 15-way tie. 15 different players have scored 6. Nobody scored 7. I think that'd be impossible. So 15 different players have scored 6 runs a game. Just so you know, the last time it happened, Joe Randa of the Kansas City Royals did it in 2004. So it's been a long time, 14 years. One guy, Mel Ott, did it, only guy to do it twice. Scored 6 runs in a game twice. That's pretty amazing. I mean, that's hard to do. So it tells you that Major League record has stood since 1957, and baseball players have gotten traditionally better throughout the years?
Who were the Milwaukee Braves playing when you started saying?
Do you know?
No.
I don't know. I have no idea. I had no idea. God, I thought I did pretty good by giving you all this other information. I'll look it up, because inquiring minds want to know. Okay? All right. October 7th. 1957, what premiered for the first time, starring Dick Clark as its host? American Bandstand, which you have no clue what that is.
America
No.
or America?
No, I got it, I missed the A. It's American Bandstand. It's American Bandstand.
American made.
Anybody know what the purpose of that was?
Dick Clark.
Dick Clark was a host forever. You might even, I mean, think, if you go to New Year's Rockin' Eve and all that, he hosted that for 100 years for ABC. He was the guy that counted down 10, 9, 8, 7 to the new year, but he obviously died. But Dick Clark, Dick Clark was a very famous man. I mean, he was a very famous celebrity. He started with American Bandstand. Anybody know what the purpose of the show was?
Like billboard.
Bring in new artists to kind of show them off and get them on a start. They'd bring in these kids would be there dancing to the music, and then they'd play records. And then you always had the American Bandstand Top 20. And then it'd be on the radio, and Dick Clark would narrate that. And he'd say, you know, don't you still get these countdowns on the radio?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Dick Clark was the guy that kind of did the first one ever. Okay. Very famous guy. Okay. All right. Moving on, we'll move on to November 3rd of 1957 and answer some questions about Sputnik 2. You remember the questions you had about Sputnik 2? What happened in Sputnik 2?
There's a dog.
Yeah. Don't you want to know about that dog?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to tell you about this dog. So, on November 3rd of 1957, the Soviet Union launched that second space satellite, Sputnik 2, into space. This one carried a dog. We mentioned that. Her name was Laika. Her name was Laika.